Hamas is slow rolling dead remains. I'm not saying dead remains don't matter, but we're talking about real, alive babies. And you can also just deny aid to a people who have just been decimated for 2 years as a punishment for what their government's done. And then you still have the nerve to call them terrorists and say they want the destruction of Israel. It's just too much for any reasonable person.
Dave Smith just humiliated a pro-Israel Zionist on Piers Morgan's program. They keep lining up, and he just keeps collecting scalps. And in this clip, they discuss the recent ceasefire, whether Hamas or Israel has broken it, and what Israel's true purpose in Gaza actually is. So let's just watch this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
This point in time, years later, I just can't even believe that you can say things like, well, look, this is a terrorist group that wants to destroy Israel. I mean, look, the reality we're looking at is that Gaza has been destroyed. And, you know, Piers, you're absolutely right to call out people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and other far-right members of the government. But look, just the Israeli government in general. Look, I thought this was like a perfect example that kind of sums up the whole conflict and what people like me and you have been talking about for quite a while, Piers. So last week, when Israel, after the ceasefire first goes into effect, when Israel accuses Hamas of slow rolling, getting back the remains of dead hostages. All the living hostages have been gotten at this point, but the remains of dead hostages, they say they're slow rolling it. So they immediately say we're going to have the aid that's coming into Gaza. Just after this latest blow up 24 hours ago, Israel announced they're going to suspend aid and distribution. That is the way in which Israel conducts this war. Don't give me any of this BS about there just happen to be some innocent people there. You literally punish the civilian population by denying them aid for the crimes of what Hamas has done, which, by the way, have not even been demonstrated. It's just Israel says Hamas was slow rolling this, or they claim that Hamas violated the ceasefire when there's reporting that contradicts that, but who knows? It's in the cloud of war right now. It's hard to know for sure. But either way, the fact that you just punish the civilian population, Israel has destroyed all of Gaza. Jared Kushner, the Jewish family friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, pro-Israel, representing the most pro-Israel administration in the history of the United States of America. Even he said it looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off. People are sleeping in tents. So, Piers, you know, me and you, we've been hearing now for 2 years that, you know, essentially Hamas uses these people as human shields. You know, Hamas, they're essentially fair game, and it's on Hamas if they get killed. Israel really doesn't want to, but they're human shields. Nothing else we could do.
That's exactly what the propaganda always has been, to consider all the Palestinians, not just Hamas, as, you know, collateral damage, or just call them human shields. We had to get to Hamas, so hey, they were killed involuntarily. We didn't mean that, even though we're approaching 100,000 deaths in Gaza, and probably many more, some of which are presumed missing. But that's exactly what's going on here. And despite that, it was Israel that actually violated the ceasefire first by only sending 300 aid trucks when they were supposed to send 600 per day. That received widespread reporting, and they eventually admitted that they had done that. They had curtailed the initial number that they had signed up for when Israel agreed to the ceasefire, I believe, on October 9th. We also know that Israel's killed about 100 Palestinians since that time. They're not allowed to kill Palestinians under the ceasefire. So it's Israel that actually broke this arrangement, and it is worth mentioning, as Dave just did, that Israel considers this a war against the Palestinian people in general, not Hamas. You know, they belie some of their propaganda by saying we just want to kill Hamas when they stick it to all the civilian population when it comes to curtailing aid over remain transfers and the timelines for it. It's just absurd.
But then you look up and the entire thing is destroyed, and they're denying aid as a weapon of war, a clear example of collective punishment. Now, I'm sure my opponent here would disagree with it being characterized as a genocide, but like, what do you call that, Piers? You've decided an entire people are just fair game because they're human shields, with no onus on you to demonstrate that there were Hamas weapons in every single one of these buildings that we destroyed or anything like that. And you can also just deny aid to a people who have just been decimated for 2 years as a punishment for what their government's done. And then you still have the nerve to call them terrorists and say they want the destruction of Israel. It's just too much for any reasonable person.
Exactly right. And by the way, I have that same standard toward my own government and its murder sprees across seas and across continents, across regions of the world, when it kills people indiscriminately to try to get to who they want to get to. When they kill innocents in the way, that's on them. That blood is on their hands, just as it is on Netanyahu's and the U.S.'s government's hands for funding this, for financing it. It's true terrorism in the truest sense, actually.
If Hamas just say, we are not disarming, what does Israel do?
First of all, Pierce, I want to speak to some of the things that Dave just said. When it comes to the fog of war, Dave, I hear that you're saying anytime it's Hamas directly targeting Israeli soldiers, directly targeting civilians, it's the fog of war. You're saying that's the fog of war. But when it comes to Israel targeting Hamas, you still refuse to accept the basic principle. There was no Wannsee conference here. Israel's not committing genocide. There's no ethnic cleansing because they're Gazans. We have one goal, Dave, one simple goal: to destroy Hamas and bring home our hostages. And all of a sudden, it's not the fog of war, Dave. It is your fog. You're unwilling to understand the most basic principle here, that there's
I think Smotrich himself would disagree with him, by the way, saying that he wants starvation to happen in Gaza and no aid should get in, by the way. That's literally what Smotrich says. It's not what I say. So he's belying his own government's figures in the cabinet, in the Likud cabinet.
probably never been a more moral war fought by an army that does not want to go to war. What's the proof? It's exactly what you're saying. As soon as we got the hostages home, as soon as President Trump put a deal on the table, it's not a perfect deal. What was the very first thing we did? We withdrew exactly to the yellow border. We exactly gave time for Hamas to return the 20 living hostages and the 29 bodies. One second, Dave. One second. I let you speak.
Over dead
1 second, Dave. I did
remains.
let you speak.
Most
I did let
moral
you speak.
army.
Just give me
Sorry, go ahead.
One
Sure.
second, if you don't mind. We waited. They just killed 2 of our soldiers. There was no fog of war. These 2 boys were sitting outside a tank, walking around. They were shot by an RPG and killed in cold blood. When I listen to you, it doesn't sound like we're dealing with Hamas. It sounds like we're dealing with a bunch of kindergarten children that are out to play in the playground.
Okay, I will say that it is a lot of kindergarten children that would go out and play on the playground that have been slaughtered by Israel and by the IDF. And if you don't believe that, look at Israel's own figures, where over 20,000 children have been killed by Israel in Palestine, in Gaza. And this isn't even heavily disputed. I don't think Israel even disputes this. There was that leak that happened some weeks back that showed that 83% of the people that have been killed in Gaza by Israel and the Israeli government were not Islamic Jihad or Hamas, but actually were innocents. And yeah, 20,000 children. So yeah, I am going to say it is kindergarten children. Some of them are pulled up from the rubble. We've seen the pictures. You can't just pull the wool over our eyes when we have TikTok in 4K anymore. I know that's why you and your acolytes and your Zionist overlords wanted to buy TikTok, so that doesn't happen anymore. But the cat's out of the bag. The toothpaste is out of the tube. The American people have seen the truth now. We're not going back.
It happens quite often in American history where their presidents kind of go all in on some type of a peace deal, not a peace deal in this case, but a ceasefire. Obviously, this is it's very important to Donald Trump's political legacy and political capital that this works. And what ends up happening is, once there's signs that it's not working, it's much easier to publicly blame the Palestinians than it is to publicly blame the Israelis. There's just much less of a political price tag. Gaza does not have a lobby and a bunch of billionaires and a bunch of influence in our country, and Israel does. And I'm sorry, but anyone can go listen to for themselves to the 60 Minutes interview with Jared Kushner and with Witkoff. Again, these are 2 representatives of the most pro-Israel government in the history of the United States of America. And they are both saying Israel was out of control. Israel had to be brought to the table. Israel was doing things that weren't in their long-term interests, says Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that takes a lot for Witkoff and Kushner, some of the hardest core Zionists you can probably find in this government, in this administration, in the United States in general, to say Jared Kushner, when he said it looked like an atomic bomb had gone off, and it did take more arm twisting of the Israelis than it did to take Hamas. That's why Netanyahu didn't want these hostages. They served as his propaganda justification to continue the killing spree in Gaza. That's why he murdered the hostage negotiators in Qatar, in Doha. That's exactly why. They could have gotten these hostages almost a year earlier in that first ceasefire, which Netanyahu violated before all the hostages were exchanged. Hamas was willing to do that. Hamas is a terrorist group, it just is, but they were willing to exchange hostages. Israel's a bigger terrorist group. They've killed far more people, and they've actually tried to wipe the Palestinians off the map. It isn't the Palestinians that have tried to wipe Israel off the map. Give me a break.
Both also said a very interesting detail that all of the intelligence that they were getting was saying that Hamas didn't want to do a deal, but as soon as they approached them with this deal, Hamas was very enthusiastic about getting it done. And by the way, that is very consistent with reporting that's been done by Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm, you know, like some of these journalists who actually do talk with the leadership of Hamas. Now, Pierce, to the point that was made before, I'm sorry, you've been interviewing me on this show for 2 years now or something like that. You've had me on a bunch of times. I mean, just tell me, to any normal person, have I ever seemed like I'm sympathetic to Hamas?
No.
Or that I'm saying that they don't have the responsibility they have? I've come on, I've chastised other critics of Israel on this show before because I think it's goofy when people do that.
And by
It's not just goofy, it's wrong to excuse the killing of innocents no matter which party does it, whether that's the United States, whether that's Hamas, or whether that's Israel. I have the same standard for all people. You don't get to kill innocent people. It's pretty simple, and people break down into tribes and sometimes fall on, well, it's excusable when this one side does it and it's not when this other side does it, but I think that's wrong-headed. The libertarian standard, or someone that, you know, believes in basic human rights that are attributable to individuals in general, doesn't have to be libertarian, says that. It applies that same moral standard to all types of people. And that's what you don't get in so many circles of this debate, I think, especially from the Zionist side.
the way, Dave, by the way, Dave,
that Hamas-
I would say it's perfectly reasonable and intellectually honest to say Hamas are despicable, and what they did on October 7th was a horrendous terror attack, which obviously demanded a response, but that also Israel's response became increasingly disproportionate. I don't think these two things are incompatible.
Of course they're not. And of course, also, it's worth looking at the fact, was Hamas ready to do this deal earlier and Israel was actually the impediment to it? Look, I'm not making excuses for Hamas. I'm not pretending they're children. I'm not denying them agency. In fact, as I've been saying for years, one of the things that I'm most furious about at Netanyahu for was his strategy of propping up Hamas for years.
Yeah, for over $1.8 billion over the course of years and years, using Qatar as the intermediary to do that. He used Qatar when, you know, all these Zionists say that, you know, we're all Qatari funded if we happen to, you know, protest Israel's policy in Gaza or U.S. financing it. But it was actually Netanyahu that worked through Qatar to fund Hamas for years and years, thinking that that would destabilize the Palestinian regime and make sure that there was never a Palestinian state. I hate to say that has worked. That part of it has worked, but it's blown up in Israel's face. Clearly so. Clearly, that's what this led to.
Specifically with the goal of thwarting a Palestinian state. And so, you know, to sit here and then turn around and talk about how evil Hamas is and use them as the justification for why you are somehow allowed to just destroy a captive people that don't have a military of their own to defend themselves. It's just, look, I'll just say this. There was one poll recently that had, they said right before October 7th, in America, do you sympathize with Israel or Palestine, was plus 48 for Israel. And then the latest poll, it was +1 for the Palestinians. You would be hard pressed to find a 50-point collapse in any issue. Like, just imagine, Pierce, if we woke up tomorrow and 90% of America was pro-life. We'd be like, what happened here? I mean, this is, and
That's so true. That would never happen in any other situation, but it's happening now because people have eyes. People are sensing that they've been lied to this entire time by the Zionist administration, the Israelis, and if they pay close attention to it, it's just clear as day. You see that this isn't just some proportionate response to a terrorist attack. This is 2 years of bloodshed and mass murder and genocide. The Americans see that now.
The reason why this shift is happening is very simply because what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is so indefensible. The relationship between Israel and the United States of America is too bizarre and it does not make sense in America's interest. And number three, this type of propaganda just doesn't work on people. You can't sit here and say you're the most moral army in the world as a response to my point that you just denied food to an entire civilian population because you claim Hamas is slow rolling dead remains. I'm not saying dead remains don't matter, but we're talking about real, alive babies.
He's really handing it to this guy, man, but that is so true. Just think of that. We're going to go in and kill people because you're slow-rolling dead remains. And it's not just we're going to kill people, meaning Hamas. We're going to make the entire Palestinian population in Gaza suffer continuously for that. Because of this, treacherous quasi-government, which really isn't even that because they don't have autonomy. Israel subjugates the people in Gaza. It's not Hamas or in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, that has any real semblance of control. It's Israel controlling it all. And they want more control, they want more annexation, and they want more greater Israel, the crusade to expand Israel's borders beyond what they are.
Children, women, who just went through this nightmare for 2 years, and you are denying denying the civilian population aid over a Hamas, something that maybe Hamas did, and you think you're the most moral army in the world?
Look, on this, Doran, let me ask you a question first. Doran, you can respond. Doran, you can respond, but let me just say,
yeah, anti-Semitic Jew, right? That's what they're calling Dave Smith. It's usually Jew hater or self-hating Jew. It's so stupid, right? The best critics of Israel, a lot of them are Jewish, like Dave and Norm Finkelstein and Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Mattei and Max Blumenthal. But he's going to call Dave an anti-Semite. Like, that's the ultimate way to escape reasonable discourse, is to call him that. It's such a tried and true and just cowardly trope.
Just say something here. Let me just say something. Doran, I would say this. What was noticeable in the Jared Kushner interview you're talking about with Witkoff as well, that they made it clear the tipping point for American intervention to rein in Israel was the completely senseless attack on Doha, on the Hamas negotiators who were considering the latest plan to bring this to an end, which ended up killing no Hamas negotiators, which in itself I think would have been an appalling thing to do at that time when people were trying to bring peace, but actually ended up killing a bunch of people unconnected, including one of the Qatari security service people. And that was the tipping point because Donald Trump, I was there in Qatar earlier this year at the state dinner by the emir for Trump. They're very close. They go back a long way. America has its biggest army military base in the Middle East.
But when it comes to contests between two quote-unquote allies, Qatar and the Israelis always win out no matter what. I think that's the point that should be made here, that should be looked at. The fact that, Trump just, wagged his finger at Netanyahu and said, no, you can't do that. Netanyahu had some half-hearted apology. It's never actually using U.S. leverage over Israel to stop. Don't do that. Don't continue your genocide in Gaza, or else we're pulling all aid, which the U.S. could ostensibly do if not for AIPAC and the Israel lobby.
Qatar, and to just go and brazenly attack Doha in the way that it did, I thought was an absolutely crazy thing for Israel to do. It showed that they were acting with complete impunity, didn't care about their number one ally, America, and the damage this might cause to the relationship with one of its biggest allies in the Middle East. And at that point, Trump went, enough, we're not doing it. I mean, do you accept that that was a catastrophically stupid thing to do by Israel?
First of all, I want to address what Dave said about the poor Palestinians, and they'll be the scapegoat because they don't have a lobby. And Jews have a lobby in the United States. Yes, Jews have a lobby in the United States. I have news for you. The Hamas regime and the Palestinians have a lobby. Do you know what it's called, Dave? It's called Qatar. Qatar, which has infected every single university in the United States, just signed a $1.2 trillion deal, which is a country that is funding more terror on behalf of Iran than any other thing.
On behalf of Netanyahu, who passed money through Qatar, by the way. And no, it does have to register like any other foreign lobby, unlike the Israel lobby, unlike AIPAC and, the DHP and all the other groups associated with the Israel lobby do not have to do that under FARA because they get that special carve-out. Just the same way they get that special carve-out, they get to be the only secret nuclear power in the world and in the Middle East. but still wage wars against countries on the basis and justification that that other country, like Iran, has a secret nuclear weapons program. Utterly absurd. This guy truly is a clown.
Who's their other patron? Iran. Why do you think Hamas came to the table? Well, let's think about what happened over the past year. Iran, their major patron, was brought to its knees by who? By Israel. The U.S. flew in and put the cherry on the very top of the sundae. We fought Iran for 11.5 days and completely eliminated the mask of Iran. Hezbollah, their other northern enemy, completely annihilated.
Well, if we eliminated the enemy of Iran, why would they be clamoring? And Netanyahu he did an interview with Ben Shapiro, of all people, right recently, saying, you know, the same war propaganda that Iran is ready to nuke Boston and New York City. Why would that be the case if they really knocked off that regime? I'm glad if you're going to run with that propaganda to counter Netanyahu's that we need more war in Iran. It's just absurd.
I think they probably, if we don't move forward, we'll be able to resuscitate, but they're out of the picture. Syria no longer exists, and Hamas has been eliminated. 3 levels of their leadership has been eliminated. 3 more months of fighting would take them out of the picture.
Yes, Syria went from Assad to elevating the former emir of al-Qaeda, al-Shara there, under U.S. support, Turkish support too, and Israeli support. That's what he's boasting about right now, that the U.S. committed treason by siding with ISIS and al-Qaeda against Assad under Operation Timber Sycamore. Didn't get the regime change until late 2024, but the U.S. was treasonous. He's boasting about that.
Very thing that you're saying, their very support network is gone. And if you ask me, Pierce, the strike on Qatar, I'm not a member of the government, I'm not a member of the security cabinet. I think it's not a coincidence that within 3 weeks of Israel striking Qatar, there's a peace deal that's bringing 20 hostages home. Now, you might think that the U.S. had no idea.
I think that's completely...
You think the U.S. had no idea.
I think that is completely...
the U.S. had no idea.
Sorry, Doran.
Pure lies.
Doran, I've got to be honest. I think that
is nonsense.
I think that's a ridiculous thing to say.
Why should we apologize for striking
this is why you're losing.
Regime that is... Wait, I'm going to understand something. Pierce, you said you were at the state dinner.
This is exactly why.
This is exactly why. I'm sorry, Dave. Yeah. This is a regime that houses the heads of Hamas. This is a regime that is intimately connected, Dave, to 9/11. Yes. Do you think that's a conspiracy theory? Do you think they were connected to 9/11?
Do you think is it a conspiracy theory that Benjamin Netanyahu sent the head of Mossad there to quote beg them to keep the funds going into Hamas? Is that a conspiracy theory?
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Okay.
And guess what?
Then.
Guess what? Guess what, Dave?
Point match,
I think it was
Pierce.
a horror.
What are we
exactly.
doing
I
here?
agree with your point.
That just says it all, doesn't it? That he's going to rip Iran for funding Hamas through Qatar as the intermediary, but, you know, doesn't say that about Netanyahu, but he does admit that that did happen. I don't think a lot of, Zionists actually would admit that, so I guess I'll give him credit to that, despite trying to maintain all other aspects of Hasbara propaganda. But look, this just says it all. That Israel can bomb another U.S. ally, and it doesn't really have any repercussions on U.S. financing of Israel. Listen, if Israel nuked England tomorrow, I'm not fully sure that the U.S. would withdraw aid from Israel. And just think about that. Just think about that kind of leeway that this criminal government in Washington, D.C. gives this rogue state that's creating and disseminating madness and mass murder throughout the region and enacting and continuing a genocide in Gaza. Thankfully, there's a ceasefire. Hasn't stopped them from killing people. As the great Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com has reported, it's something like 100 people that they have killed since the ceasefire, and Israel broke the ceasefire first. But all the news you see is about how, Hamas is just putting this ceasefire under duress and really, towing the line between violating it to the extent that Israel's just going to have to continue its genocide. Look, those of us that saw this ceasefire for what it was were happy for it. We were happy for a temporary reprieve in fighting, at least in the relative sense. That's a good thing, right? But we knew that it didn't answer any of the qualms between these two peoples. It doesn't put the prospect of a Palestinian state on the table, not whatsoever. And it seems more concerned, this plan, with the redevelopment, economic redevelopment of Gaza, for, of course, the benefit of the people closely connected to Trump, like Tony Blair and Jared Kushner. What a coincidence that is. But that's what we get. Dave utterly destroyed this clown, and that's exactly what he was. This is just indefensible. You can't justify the U.S.-Israeli relationship at this point. It's too much of an unholy alliance, and thankfully more and more Americans are waking up to that fact. But I do want to hear from you. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Dave? Did he absolutely pound this guy into dust here? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Pierce Morgan too. If you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you support the channel in that way, I will graciously appreciate that, so much so that I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on my channel. And if you want a free copy, a digital copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, it's available for free down below in the description. Just click that link, sign up there, you'll get access to it, and that's on me. No obligation, no payment. You'll get it. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.